This video is brought to you by Blessed Be God Boutique, maker of Catholic fashionable apparel, handmade accessories, and more.
Cardinal Fernandez, the prefect for the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, has been very busy approving or not approving various unresolved Marian apparitions from, well, frankly, over the centuries. Back in May, the Dicastery, under the authority of Pope Francis, issued new guidelines on the approval of Marian apparitions and other supernatural phenomena. These guidelines made it so that any quote-unquote approved apparition would not actually really be approved, in that the Vatican would not say whether the event that they are examining was supernatural in origin. This includes miracles, by the way, which begs a lot of questions for the future of canonizations. But since these new guidelines have been issued, there's been a flurry of activity. And some have wondered what's going to happen to some rather high-profile ones that were quasi-approved, or even will the Vatican re-examine ones that are, we'll say, inconvenient for the Vatican in the post-conciliar era. You see, the highest-profile Marian apparitions after Our Lady of Fatima all bore messages of a corruption in the clergy. Reportedly, cardinals who were in the room when the third secret of Fatima was read by John the 23rd, Pius the 12th, John Paul II, Paul the 6th, and even Benedict the 16th all said the third secret of Fatima detailed an apostasy in the church led from the top. Take all the time you need to wrap your head around the implications of that. This was said by both conservative and very liberal cardinals. This is not an ideological thing, per se. It might also be why John the 23rd said the third secret of Fatima was not a message for our time, because he could not possibly see what was happening. He thought we were in the springtime of the new evangelization. And these new guidelines Fernandez has issued have a focus on them. One of the guidelines for whether an apparition's message will be approved or not is whether the apparition comes with a message sowing division or distrust in the church between the laity and the hierarchy. Remember what I just said about the third secret of Fatima. Let's talk about this in some detail, and I'm going to give you excerpts from the three highest profile approved and semi-approved Marian apparitions that may get revisited, or at least attempted to be buried and pushed to the sidelines further than they already are, because they violate this new rule. One guideline that is critical for understanding what could be used to bury the message of Fatima is to revisit old approved apparitions. There are serious reasons to doubt the validity of the message of the third secret of Fatima as it was given by Rome 25 years ago. At the very least, the vision that was presented by Rome in 2000 did not contain the explanation for the vision, like every other Marian apparition has had itself. Every Marian apparition that provides a vision of the future, of some warning, comes with an explanation. And we know from the testimony of the cardinals who claim to have seen the third secret or have been in the room when it was read aloud by the popes of their day that the third secret of Fatima details that apostasy in the church that I mentioned a moment ago, led from the top by the hierarchy. Numerous cardinals have said the same thing from across the internal church spectrum, and we can see the message of apostasy in the messages of apparitions like Our Lady of the Good Event of the Purification, which is for some reason often miscalled Our Lady of Good Success because of a bad translation of her name, as well as in the messages of Our Lady of La Salette and Our Lady of Akita, both of which speak about a corruption in the clergy and among the bishops. These messages, to borrow a phrase from the Vatican's recent declaration on apparition, sow what they would call a sectarian spirit that builds distrust between the laity and the post-conciliar church. I'll bring you that evidence in a moment by showing you sections from Our Lady's messages that will probably get buried by this Vatican quietly, and remind you of this. Last week, Cardinal Fernandez approved an apparition in India. That's sort of the blueprint of what will be approved going forward. That apparition in India had a devotion going back to like the 16th century, when miraculous healing miracles were happening among the local population, as well as divine intervention in the lives of Portuguese sailors who landed in India at the site of the present shrine during a hurricane, and they landed unscathed. The following that following there has over the centuries become ecumenical in nature. And the general message of there sounds ecumenical if you spin it a certain way, because there are people from various religious beliefs coming to that shrine for healing. And there is no message of divine chastisement in the messages of what we now call Our Lady of Good Health in India. It is in many ways like Our Lady of Lourdes, with the miraculous healings, and Our Lady of Lourdes, as to my knowledge, doesn't have a message of chastisement coming for mankind. That is the kind of apparition messages that they are looking to approve and promote, not messages warning of people in the hierarchy, and likely popes, leading people out of the faith. And I say popes because Cardinal Odie, a liberal cardinal from the 1980s and 1990s, admitted that the third secret warned of an apostasy led from the top of the church, meaning from the chair of Peter. That's why Sister Lucia was so scared to write it down, because the idea would have been unfathomable to Catholics until the post-conciliar era. But here is evidence for what they're talking about. They don't like these kinds of Marian apparitions, the ones that have some of the most widest followings and specialists in them. They don't like those messages. Here's why. For example, followings from Our Lady of Good Success, as people call it, or proper translation, Our Lady of the Good Event of the Purification. Quote, unfaithful religious who, under the appearance of virtue and bad-spirited zeal, would turn upon religion, who nurse them at their breast. During this time, inasmuch as this poor country will lack the Christian spirit, the sacrament of extreme unction will be little esteemed. Many people will pass away without receiving it, either because of the negligence of their families or their false sentimentality that tries to protect the sick from seeing the gravity of their situation, or because they will rebel against the spirit of the Catholic Church, impelled by the malice of the devil. Thus, many souls will be deprived of innumerable graces, consolations, and the strength they need to make that great leap from time to eternity. As for the sacrament of matrimony, which symbolizes the union of Christ with his church, it will be attacked and profaned in the fullest sense of the word. The stonecutters, which will then be in power, will enact iniquitous laws with the objective of doing away with the sacrament, making it easy for everyone to live in sin, encouraging the procreation of children born without the blessing of the church. The Christian spirit will rapidly decay, extinguishing the precious light of faith until it reaches the point that there will be an almost total and general corruption of customs. The effects of secular education will increase, which will be one reason for the lack of priestly and religious vocations. The secular clergy will leave much to be desired because priests will become careless in their sacred duties. Lacking the divine compass, they will stray from the road traced by God for the priestly ministry, and they will become attached to wealth and riches, which they will unduly strive to obtain. How the church will suffer during this dark night. Lacking a prelate and father to guide them with paternal love, gentleness, strength, wisdom, and prudence, many priests will lose their spirit, placing their souls in great danger. This will mark the arrival of my hour. And that is just an excerpt from the message of what most people call Our Lady of Good Success, which came from Quito, Ecuador. Any reference to that country is a reference to Ecuador, which, if you know what happened in that country in the 20th century, you begin to understand. And yes, those messages explicitly said the 20th century. Our Lady of Lost Sluts, one of the more controversial ones, because there's parallel messages. There were parts of the messages that were found locked away in the Vatican and not released until the late 20th century. And it's one that the Vatican desperately tried to suppress to some degree, even while approving it, going back more than a century. Here's why. Quote, priests, my son's ministers, priests by their evil life, by their irreverences and their impiety in celebrating the holy mysteries, love of money, love of honor and pleasures, priests have become sewers of impurity. Yes, priests call forth vengeance, and vengeance is suspended over their heads. Woe to priests, and to priests consecrated to God, who by their infidelities and their life are crucifying my son anew. The sins of persons consecrated to God cry to heaven and call for vengeance. And now here is vengeance at their very doors. For no longer is anyone found to beg mercy and pardon for the people. There are no more generous souls. There is now no one worthy of offering the spotless victim to the eternal on the world's behalf. Society is on the very eve of the most terrible scourges and greatest events. One must expect to be governed by a rod of iron and to drink the chalice of God's wrath. Italy will be punished for its ambition in wanting to shake the yoke of the Lord of Lords. Thus she will be handed over to war. Blood will flow on all sides. Churches will be closed or desecrated. Priests, religious will be driven out. They will be put to an end, and to a cruel end. Many will abandon the faith. The number of priests and religious who will separate themselves from the true religion will be great. Even bishops will be found among these persons. Let the Pope beware of miracle workers, for the time has come for the most astonishing wonders to take place on the earth and in the air. Lucifer, together with a great number of devils, will be loosed from hell. Little by little they will abolish the faith, and that even in persons consecrated to God, they will be so blind them that, without a special grace, these persons will take on the spirit of these evil angels. A number of religious houses will lose the faith entirely and cause many souls to be condemned. Bad books will abound over the earth, and the spirit of darkness will everywhere spread universal relaxation in everything concerning God's service. They will have very great power over nature. There will be churches to serve these spirits. People will be transported from one place to another by these evil spirits, and even priests, because they will not have lived by the good spirit of the gospel, which is a spirit of humility, charity, and zeal for the glory of God." End quote. Did you notice there that the sins of these priests, in their impurity, call out to heaven for vengeance? There are certain sins that call out to heaven for vengeance in the Bible. One of them is the sin of James Martin, that sin that he advocates for, that he advocates that the church's teaching be changed, that he has said he believes Scripture is wrong on. He has said St. Paul got it wrong. That language there is very purposeful. She was warning us of McCarrick. She was warning us of men like James Martin and the countless priests like them. She was warning us of them in the mid-19th century, when priests like that were very beginning to enter the seminaries. Because the problem of the McCarrick kind goes back in the records to the early 20th century, unfortunately, and it just snowballed from there, especially when the infiltration really began. But as we did before, we now turn to Our Lady of Akita as evidence of what they will do. It's very short, this excerpt. Quote, "The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against bishops. The priests who venerate me will be scorned and opposed by their confreres. Churches and altars sacked. The church will be full of those who accept compromises, and the demon will press many priests and consecrated souls to leave the service of the Lord." End quote. "The priests who venerate me will be scorned by their confreres." Again, it's corruption in the church. In the church. Men trying to take the spotless bride of Christ and turn her into another secular entity. And they will fail. Our Lady has promised that she will triumph. This is why we promote the 5 First Saturdays devotion, asked for by Our Lady of Fatima. If we want to bring about that triumph, there will not be a proper consecration done of the countries requested until the Lady keep the 5 First Saturdays. Just do it once in your lifetime. It's all you need to do. And no, I don't believe Francis's attempt at a consecration worked, because if it was authentic and if it was the real deal, it would have had an effect by now. Sister Lucia said the effect would be almost instant. It's not happened. What do you think of this? Do you see why those new rules talk about sowing divisions in the church as being a guideline for not approving Marian apparitions? Do you believe that they will go after previously approved Marian apparitions, or ones that are half approved, like Our Lady of Akita? Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.